So I knew from that and from the signals I got from everybody that this was not something they were really supposed to talk about. But I remember equally well being in 11th grade, two very distinct memories that are important to me. One is having a fantastic biology teacher in 11th grade who just somehow mesmerized me and made me realize this was something really interesting. This was something fascinating. There's a whole secret world out there of science with symbols and interesting stuff that I wanted to get involved in. And the other thing I remember from that year is sitting at home. We got Time magazine every week, and seeing on the cover of Time magazine a big picture that said Stonewall across it. And a bunch of people who were raising their arms, and I thought, oh my God, that's me. And one day I'm going to join them. And I got to go ahead to start researching the genetics of sexual orientation. Well, it turned out to be a fascinating study because basically nobody had looked. And so the first thing we did was like the simplest thing you can imagine, which is we went around to gay men and to lesbians and asked them, do you have any other gay people in your family? And who are they? And then we formalized that and did a real pedigree study. I started traveling around, talking to people's aunts and uncles and parents and the rest of their families, and started simply drawing pedigrees of the families of gay men and lesbians. And it only took about a year or so to collect enough data to see there was something really interesting, which is not only did gay people have more gay relatives in their families than you would expect by chance, meaning something is being transmitted in the family, but when you looked at the families of gay men, most of those gay relatives were on the mother's side of the family. And that was really interesting because to a geneticist right away that says there could be something that's genetic that's being transmitted on the X chromosome, which of course males only inherit from the female side of the family. It doesn't prove that. We get a lot of other things through our mothers, like our chocolate chip cook recipes, or whether or not we're Jewish, for example, but at least it suggested a possibility. And by that time, the technology had advanced to the point where we are actually able to set up a DNA study, get a whole bunch of families where there were two gay brothers, and start mapping their DNA up along the X chromosome. That, again, only took a year or so. And when we got the linkage results, we were somewhat surprised and very interested to find that there was a significant linkage in one particular region of the X chromosome. But the interesting question for this conference is, well, what did you tell reporters about yourself? Were you out of the closet or not? Well, this was kind of interesting because by this time, I'd been out of the closet for a long time. Everybody knew I was gay. My boss at the NIH knew, Tony Fauci knew, the White House knew. But what had happened was that about 6 months before our work came out, another gay scientist, Simon LeVay, had announced his research on the hypothalamus, a very important and interesting study. And when he was asked by reporters, are you gay? He said, yes, I am gay. And what had happened is that had become the focus of the discussion. Rather than the important scientific findings, it was all about, well, he's a gay scientist. Does that mean he's biased? And so instead of saying, well, what's the p-value? They were like, well, how gay is he exactly? And as I thought about it, I realized that this was a direction of the conversation that was driven by the anti-gay forces. And they were delighted that he was out of the closet because it meant that they could completely discount the research and they could just say he was nothing but an activist who was pushing the homosexual agenda. No matter how good the data was, no matter how convincing the science was, that became the argument. So, okay, I do want to give you just a brief update on the science because people are often curious. There's good news and interesting news. The good news is that since 1993, there have now been many large population-based studies on the role of genetics in sexual orientation, and that data has completely confirmed that being gay or lesbian is indeed a partially heritable trait. There's substantial genetic loading. The population data now is really totally compelling. So despite what the fundamentalists sometimes say is a lack of data, in fact, there's much more abundant data. And when people ask, well, don't you respect my religious beliefs? I'm like, well, not if you're going to put me in jail. No, I don't really. So this is a matter of education, and it is a matter of scientific literacy, because this is knowledge, and this is knowledge that we can do more and do better to get out there. So again, I don't think it should be part of our fundamental rights, But it is part of the debate, and it's a part that we can play an important role in.
So likewise, I think the greatest activism that we can do as scientists is to draw in not other gay people, but to draw in our allies. And I believe that there are many of those allies, especially in science, where people are rational and people are thoughtful. They may not yet know that they're allies because they may not know that they have gay colleagues or that this is an issue. And that's where all of us can really play a role, is simply by being open, authentic about ourselves, and about letting people know that this is an issue that affects them just as it affects us, and that diversity is a strength, not something that should be punished, and that we all need to be able to contribute to our society in the best way that we can.